weekend here in the Sunshine State. As long as you're staying hydrated and keep applying that sunscreen. A rather unforgiving 98 degrees if you find yourself out here in Central Florida, but a few degrees cooler if you're out on the East Coast, next to that ocean breeze. Temps should be lower in the afternoon due to our regularly scheduled afternoon monsoons with a chance of hail. So be sure to drive home safely on that afternoon commute.
I would like to disappear. I don't feel sad. Nothing happened. I think that's the part that's so difficult to understand. Nothing happened. I came out here to see if I could still feel anything. I still don't have an answer. Maybe I'm just... Actually, I'm not sure why I came out here at all. Sometimes I get the feeling that I'm being suffocated by the mundanity that my life can occasionally default to. This never-ending cycle of going to work and sitting in my room until the early hours of the morning, in a seemingly desperate attempt to stave off the next day for as long as I can. The next day comes anyway, as it always does. There are just some things that will always be out of your control. Feels like there's a whole lot of that. Things outside my control. I have this one thought that I always come back to, where instead of going to work, I get on the highway, drive north for as long as I can, until I run out of gas. Maybe even stop and fill up and keep going. That desire to disappear is just a nice thought, sometimes. It's almost comforting that that option is always there. In a way, at least. But I do have responsibilities. I do have people who need me. I can't afford to just vanish. But I can put my life on hold for a few hours and live that thought vicariously through someone else. And maybe that someone else is a bird. A Short Hike is a game that was created by Adam Robinson Yu. It is exactly what its title is describing. Kind of. The protagonist, Claire, is going away for a while, but she's hesitant. It seems that there's a similar kind of emptiness that's taking hold over her life that makes her feel stuck to one place and trapped in her own head. Getting away for a while could be a nice change of pace. A change of scenery could be just what you need when your mind seems to be frozen. But even when she does arrive at the game's main setting, Hawk Peak Provincial Park, she's reluctant to do anything but wait around for a phone call from her mom. But not here, her Aunt May says. There's no reception down here. The only place you could get a signal is at the top of Hawk Peak. And with that, you have just enough motivation to start hiking. Simple. What I enjoy most about a short hike is this feeling of growth. At the start of the game, you can't do much. But as you play, you collect golden feathers, which allow you to climb to higher peaks, fly higher into the sky, and run a whole lot faster. That growth and progression comes with exploration of the island, going out of your way and off the beaten path to find things you wouldn't have seen if you walked the same path everybody else did. Take the time to smell the flowers and find things that nobody else can show you. It also comes from helping others. This rabbit who's lost their headband. This bird who wants seashells to make a necklace for someone that they want to show their appreciation to. This guy who just needs to make some extra money to pay for school. Helping others is a great way to spread some of that positivity that you want so desperately for yourself, and actually get some of it back in return. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself is something you can do for someone else. And finally, this growth comes not just from doing something when you're ready, it comes from trying and failing, realizing that there aren't always limits to how many times you can try to solve a problem. And even if you fail over and over and over again, it just makes the reward that much sweeter. Climbing this mountain isn't always going to be easy. It is a long road. The cliffs are high, and the conditions can often be very uncomfortable. But the reward for overcoming obstacles you thought you never could is always worth it in the end. The aurora is beautiful up here. What once seemed scary and near impossible was something that I was always strong enough to accomplish. Whether that thing that seemed impossible was climbing a mountain or just getting out of bed. That feeling of emptiness and worry melts away. I think about how far I've come and the many miles it must be between here and home. And finally, home comes calling. But let's be real. For a lot of us, these feelings don't just go away. They stick around. There are good days and bad, but that feeling of emptiness can persist. No matter how many mountains you climb, no matter how many hikes you go on. That feeling of being crushed by all your worries and doubts, that tightness in your chest, that feeling that you know logically everything is fine, yet your breath is endlessly leaving you. Have you ever played Celeste? Celeste is a near perfect game. Super tight controls, most of the time, really beautiful art, interesting and extremely challenging level design that never feels impossible or unfair, yet can still make me want to put my forehead through my keyboard. And most notably, at least for me, the music was created by Lena Raine. The game follows a girl named Madeline as she sets out to climb Celeste Mountain in order to regain some form of self-confidence that she's lost and prove to herself that she's capable of great things. All of this becomes a lot more difficult when we meet her other self, a personification of her depression and anxieties that's obsessed with thwarting any and all attempts Madeline makes to continue up the mountain. Madeline is haunted by her fears and doubts at just about every turn. There are moments of calm here and there, but Celeste makes sure to show this ascent as a near constant struggle for Madeline, and in turn, a constant struggle for the player. This game is tough in ways that most games just aren't. Here are some enemies with more health. Here's a boss that hits really hard but doesn't leave many openings for you to attack. This enemy you had no way of seeing just dropped from the ceiling and now half your health is gone. Step out in the open for a millisecond too long? A sniper just domed you. But Celeste feels like a breath of fresh air, because they'll throw levels at you like this that seemingly demand flawless execution and near pixel-perfect movements. But it's possible. Celeste takes Madeline's struggles with anxiety and depression and finds an interesting way to use them as a gameplay element. This game is tough as nails, but through many deaths, thinking outside the box, and simply not giving up, you will be able to get through it. That determination runs between both you, the player, and Madeline. She dreams of climbing effortlessly through the ruins of the mountain, only for her darker half to turn that dream into a nightmare. She tries to help the ghostly owner of this hotel clean the place up. Her other half shows up just to berate and belittle him, sending him to his breaking point until enough is enough, and then he tries to kill Madeline. Madeline does actually try and confront the personification of her fears head on, take charge and rise above her insecurities. She gets dragged all the way down the mountain and deep into a large cavern, just as she was about to reach the top. But that's just like life for a lot of people, right? You look at these situations and see how the worst parts of ourselves can get in the way of what we truly want. As much as we would like, sometimes it can be nearly impossible to get out of our own way. Madeline wants to get to the summit of the mountain, sure. But does she want it any more than she's afraid of it? For most of the game, it's difficult to say. She wishes she could simply ignore or find a way around the worst parts of herself, but by trying to sidestep her insecurities and never acknowledge them, that's what ends up doing the most damage. It can be a tough realization to make, that you can't get rid of such a large part of yourself. That other half of Madeline is exactly what it is, half of Madeline. If she were to get rid of it, what would be left? That other part of her is ruled by fear, anger, and apprehension, but those emotions are part of the human experience and are healthy for that overall experience. It's only through acceptance and kindness towards herself that she's able to become the best version of herself. And just like all of the other story elements in Celeste, this has an effect on gameplay as well. Throughout the game, you get used to being able to dash just once in the air before having to rest. But now you can dash twice. That may not seem like a big deal, but this has huge implications not only for how much easier it is to get around, but also for how much more difficult the game can get. And it does get more difficult, unbelievably so. These challenges are some of the most difficult you'll find in the main game, and it is by a huge degree. But even in the face of this impossible difficulty, here you are, rising to the top of the mountain quicker than you ever did before. Revisiting each of the game's locations as you make your way up the mountain takes just a few minutes each time, as you and your other half literally soar to the top of the mountain. My heart pounding, my sweaty hands finding it more and more difficult to grip the controller. I give this game everything I have before I finally reach the top. And when I do, I finally feel my shoulders lower, and let out a sigh of relief with a contented smile on my face. In this moment, I imagine that Madeline and I share a near identical sense of satisfaction and relief. Madeline is able to summit the mountain not because her fears are gone, but because she's able to acknowledge them and still be brave in the face of danger. And once she does reach the top, it is intensely gratifying. I kind of wanted to go off script for a little bit. This isn't something I normally do, but I kind of thought it was fitting for this video. Recently I went on a hike on a trail that is on this river that is near where I used to live. And I actually made a video on this river about 3 years ago called The River Where Time Stops. And it is about this river that's near where I lived and how it's kind of just been like this constant in my life where I've always said, no matter what happens, no matter how much time passes, I can always come back to this river and it will be just the same as I left it. But that's not entirely true. When I went back there recently, I noticed trees that had fallen that were standing the last time I was there. There were cliffs that had eroded away, and trails that I had walked before that were gone, overgrown. And it kind of made me sad a little bit, I won't lie. And it got me thinking about myself and my own fallen trees and my own eroded cliffs and my own overgrown trails. And just the things about me that have changed. That river is still the same river, but it's completely different from how I remember it. Maybe not completely, but very different. Am I still the same person that I was when I went back there? Am I the person that I'm supposed to be? And I don't know. When I talked about Celeste and A Short Hike, both of them are about, realizing that you're more than what you think you are. That no matter how crippling your anxiety, no matter how deep and dark the pit of depression that you're in, you can always crawl back out. You can always climb that mountain. And all it just takes is just a single moment of clarity to really give you the kick you need to go. But for a lot of people, that's not always true. That moment of clarity never comes. And I think back to this time, almost a decade ago now, was the last time that I was truly sad. Or at least, close to inconsolably sad. I think about it now and it makes me laugh because, really, it's not that it wasn't a big deal, but it's not as earth-shattering as I really thought it was back then. But it was something that through my own irrational fears and my emotional insecurities that I was wholly unprepared to deal with. And it affected me. I was crushed. I remember that I just never wanted to get out of bed. I didn't really eat very much for 2 weeks. I lost a good bit of weight, and I didn't even want to see any of my friends because to even see them, to look at them at all, was like I was ashamed, as if I was doing something morally wrong by being sad, as if it was such a horrible crime to be upset. But I remember at the same time I was really, really excited for this game called Rime to come out. It had sort of like a Last Guardian-esque development where it was announced well before it was ready, and they kind of went dark for a while, and eventually one day they were like, hey, here's the new trailer. It's coming out in less than a year. And I was super excited. Which was crazy because that game was not at all what I expected it to be. And it kind of came around at like the perfect time. It's kind of weird to think that a video game can kind of change the trajectory of your life, but this one definitely kind of nudged me onto the right path, I think. And this is my segue into talking about Rime. Pretty smart, huh? I had been looking forward to Rime for a long time. I remember that full-body feeling of wonder when I first woke up on the sun-baked shores of that quiet island. As I began to explore, that quietness started to get louder. I could tell this wasn't all as it seemed. There was more here than the island was letting on. I never could have realized what this was setting me up for. I explored more of the island, finding small caves in the cliffs, checking out the ruins over the water. I solved puzzle after puzzle, each one leading me deeper into the island, and deeper into the shadow of its most mysterious structure. A massive tower, far off into the distance. It is impossible not to feel the significance of this place, most obviously because of the sheer size of the thing, but also how every path on the island seems to be pulling you closer to it. There are few places you can go that won't point you right back in its direction. And as these paths lead me closer to the heart of the island, so does he. I've been seeing this man in the red cloak over and over. Always off in the distance, always just out of reach. Anytime I have the opportunity to get close, he's disappeared by the time I get to where he was standing. I get so near to him again and again, only for him to calmly walk just out of view and vanish. I continue to follow the trail. I find statues that react to my voice to open new paths, metal spheres that control the position of the sun, and most notably of all, I meet this small fox, who is somehow always near whenever I become lost, always eager to lead me in the right direction when I lose my way. When I reach the bridge leading to the tower's entrance, I can see that tiny glimmer of deep red in the distance. He's waiting for me. The faint barks of the fox call out through the wind. The man is gone again before I can reach him. But finally I've made it. The only way left to go is up. Each new floor holds a large door, each one leading to totally new places that seem far removed from the tower itself, yet still remain connected to it despite the space being almost physically impossible. I explored this desert. Ruins and signs of a civilization are everywhere. Ghosts and wraiths walk under the lonely cliffs on the shores of a place they might have once called home. What could have happened to this place? The answer is shown to us pretty quickly. The next door in the tower takes us to something that feels like the complete opposite. Where the first was dominated by dry, scorched, and cracked earth, the ruins of an ancient civilization that was torn apart by the anger of a deadly monster. This place is blooming with life. Trees and moss grow all over. Water flows through the quiet halls. But it seems the real inhabitants of this place haven't been awake for years. And the only bit of sentient life that's filled their place are the wraiths from the desert, angrier than ever. What once would run away at the first sight of the boy will now openly attack him if we get too close. But we have some help in the form of these guys, finally awake after all these years. Guiding them through the ruins isn't always easy, but this little non-verbal agreement we've made to help each other definitely helps me feel like I'm not so alone for once. There is a lot that this game seems to throw at you throughout, but I can't help feeling like there's still a crucial piece of information that we're missing. Until then, all of this is just up to my interpretation. On the island, I helped a tree grow beautiful, brilliant leaves, only to later on kill a different one. Throughout the game, there are puzzles where I have to use my own shadow and another similarly shaped but taller one to open doors. That angry bird monster is eventually defeated only after I call storms to the desert, storms that bring no rain to a land that so desperately needs it, but only violent lightning that eventually ends up brutally killing the bird. But this leads us to our final stop. Torrential rain. The ruins of some large temple with no distinct features other than gray stonework and a statue of what looks to be the boy himself. And the wraiths from before seem sorrowful and almost completely uninterested in me. And before making my way to the center structure, I'm forced to say goodbye to the only two friends I've made along the way. In under 3 hours. I honestly can't believe how attached I've gotten to them. I can't believe how invested I've become in this boy. I still have no idea where he's going or why he's going there. Until finally, the rug is swept out from under me. It isn't until the end of the game when you realize what's been going on. The beautiful island where the game begins, an enormous contrast to the rest of the game, seemingly in denial of the game's later themes of passing and loss. A burning hot desert, patrolled by an enraged bird creature, who's finally defeated by storms that seem even angrier than it was. These sphere-headed robots who, in exchange for us reviving them, will sacrifice themselves to show us the way forward. And finally, these depressing ruins, soaked in an unending torrent of harsh rain, denial, anger, bargaining, and depression. 4 of the 5 stages of grief. Throughout our journey, we see visions of that man in a red cloak, flashbacks to a night where this boy and the man were caught in a terrible storm on the sea. If you're paying attention, you'll notice the game starts with that same storm. At this point, it's easy to connect the dots and realize what this all means, until the dots start to connect in reverse. The tower inverts. The sides are switched. The roles are reversed. The truth was always that our protagonist, the young boy, was lost to the sea, and his father, stricken with sorrow over the loss of his son, is trying to overcome his grief. Which brings us to the final stage. We see the father as he goes into his son's room one last time. The weight of this boy's absence flows through every inch of this unlived-in bedroom. Signs from a time where he once lived here, watching the ocean outside his window, reading books, or sleeping safe and sound in his bed. And in one final heartbreaking twist, we see one last memory of the boy sitting on his bed, one last time for his father to say goodbye. And finally, acceptance. Rime used an extreme example of loss and acceptance of that loss to show me the answer to a question I didn't realize I needed to ask. I had at that time fully accepted where I was, but with more of a shit happens, get over it sort of mindset. I had allowed myself to get cold and motionless. I stagnated in bitterness over something that I lost that, in all honesty, I was always going to lose. People are often unequipped or unprepared for grief because they never learned how to deal with it. It is very refreshing that there are people out there willing to tell stories like these that don't pull their punches, that are realistic in their emotional depictions of the heaviness of grief, depression, or anxiety, and not in the stereotypical 2D side-scroller that's an allegory for depression trope that the indie genre has let itself default to time and time again. Occasionally, you will find gems like these that are honest, upfront, and most importantly, uncompromising about the stories they're trying to tell. And thanks to Rime coming along at the perfect time in my life, I gained the vulnerability to be able to feel what I needed to feel, process the emotions that I so desperately needed to process, and eventually come to accept what was in a more meaningful way and move on to better days.